Okay, so, oh, it's grabbing the wrong window capture, so I will grab that one. And that one. Okay, there we go. So that should be better streaming of the actual slides. Okay, right. So, I thought I'd start at 6:25 just to give people time to arrive in the morning and make sure everybody's ready. I was intending to do the VR setup because as you can see by my background, I'm back in my office. But I just have been having meetings from 10 this morning through to now, and so I've had absolutely no time. All right, so yes, people who are on Discord and listening only to my Discord, we also have a YouTube audio, and having the Discord audio separated from the YouTube audio will seem a bit strange. So what I will do is I'll keep connected in both, so you can talk to me on Discord, because if you're on Discord, you can unmute yourself and talk to me there. Also, for those people who are merely on Discord, they can listen to me there. For those people on YouTube, on there, then you can kind of listen, interact, and I'll keep an eye on the Discord chat, which is just in the top corner there, and I'll also listen to any questions that you pop in with from there, and yeah, it's kind of up to you how you want to listen to the lecture. Okay, so big data, this was the other thing you voted on, that and VR, so I thought we'd do big data this week and talk about some of the tech around big data and some of the interesting game technology challenges around big data, and where that might be going, and a wee discussion around ethics, and get some feedback from you on what you as a group see the kind of future of big data. Because again, with this course, one of the things we want to look at is what the technology is, kind of what's some of the background, where is it going in the future, and also the ethics of it, right? So it's kind of trying to get you to think about those things, and big data has a number of those aspects to it as well, just like AI had last week. Right, so there is audio. You guys are all hearing me. That's all fine. I can keep going. So thumbs up somewhere. There's some thumbs up going. That's great. Well, yeah, got some thumbs up. Okay, so make sure I'm on the right slide. Okay, so big data. We're going to cover what is it, what it means for games, what's the future, and some ethics. Okay, so what is big data? Now, some of you will have had a big data. That is not scaled properly on the YouTube stream. Whoa, I'm getting YouTube stream people telling me that I've not scaled things properly on the YouTube stream. So I need to go over to there, and it's because that guy has decided he's huge, and that goes there, and that goes there. Right, that's better. Sorry about that. So, there we go. So, big data. Hopefully some of you have had some big data courses, and so the idea of variety, velocity, and volume is not new to you. There are other aspects that people have added, more V's to big data, so veracity, whether you can believe the data or not, and value, so how valuable the data is, right? So you can actually kind of go 5 V's now, but the traditional one are 3 V's. So the idea of the volume, the amount of data we're getting has gone up to the point where we're now saying there's just so much of it. But for something to be truly in the category of big data, we want to also not just have the volume, because if it's the same data and we've just got lots of it, that might not be the full challenge of big data. It also, we want it to be coming in real time. So it's not just a huge amount of data, it's also data that's happening now that needs to be processed now. And it's also a variety of data. Now, for games, we get all of those 3 quite clearly from MMOs and from modern games. We can be getting a variety of data in potentially large volumes, and certainly in real time at velocity. So when you look at game data, we're talking millions of connected users. We're talking about real time interaction with those. And we're also able to process quite a lot of connected data. So it's not necessarily just my keyboard input or my mouse location. I also can see what choices I'm making, what game actions I'm taking. But if we're doing side channel stuff, you might also be recording some of the visuals, because I know I have a webcam here. A lot of you, because you've listened to Norsis, have a little sticker over your webcam, because you know that it's possible for these systems to be turned on potentially remotely. And also sometimes I've got like a little white light next to my laptop webcam, but I can turn on without the white light going on. So yeah, that issue of a camera pointing at me while I'm using my computer, again, could collect facial data. And so some games have collected facial recognition data to try and work out the emotion of the player. Now this is really useful from a player perspective, but incredibly invasive from from a player's perspective. It's incredibly invasive from a game developer's perspective. Lots of great data, but it's what we're collecting that can be a problem. So if we're collecting a variety of data, we're hooking it up to understand the player, then we're into this kind of some of those questions that we have, right? So we can collect data, and we can say, well, what can we collect? Right? So just technically, what's possible to collect, how we collect it. So currently, so there was a controversy last year with the one of the Google Home speakers, because of the fabric that they put around the speaker, because they'd made it and it had a button that you could press, which would trigger it. So you wouldn't have to go, okay, Google. You'd just press the button and you'd be able to say something to it. The problem was that when they did the industrial redesign and added a fabric cover for it, which was cool, that unfortunately also meant that the button, if the fabric tightened, would get pressed automatically, which meant randomly you would just record background audio from the environment you're in and package it up and send it to Google and have it live on their servers. And people got a bit concerned that, it was just randomly recording their house. If you've got your Google phone with you and you go, okay, Google, your phone may well trigger and record what you next say to send it to Google to get processed and be sent back, which means any, a roundabout audio happening in the background will be recorded. Games can, of course, do the same thing. There's certainly in the bad DAO days, when we would use things like the platform for making games easily from web pages. Oh, I've forgotten the name of that one. But it was a wrapper where you'd write your JavaScript and HTML pages and it would automatically generate a mobile app. Because it was a wrapper, it would ask for permissions for everything, which meant your app was asking for all permissions to access all parts of your device. You can see this in games that there has been some games where they'll ask for image access because you pick an avatar. But once you've given it access to your to the images on your mobile phone, it can just scroll through your entire photo library on your phone, looking for whiteboards with interesting information on them, or people's faces to see who do you know, who are your friends. If I get a photograph, I could then check that against Facebook to see if it would image tag any of your friends. So I don't need to ask for your friends list. I just look at all the photographs you have and find all your friends that way. Right? Now, that's invasive. That's terrible. We can't, it's possible to collect that data, right? So what can we collect in terms of possibility? That's all in there. How do we collect it? Well, technically for Android phones, you have to ask, right? So you have to ask permissions, and certainly they've done a much better job now with Android. You can have it having to ask permission. But if you're playing on PC, yeah, if you've got access to things, you've got access to things, right? So it's quite concerning how easy it is to just kind of fossick around and grab other things once you're running an executable on your machine. So there are some privileges to access the internet, but if you're playing online, of course you're going to grant access to use the internet. And this is why kind of people are so concerned about the way games have so much access to your PC and why PCs are so vulnerable. Macs are also vulnerable and Linux are vulnerable to all sorts of things. If you're choosing to run it, then you're choosing to trust that developer. So once you've done that, the question is like the how is relatively easy. System calls. You can even do some side channel things, and we've seen some of those side channel attacks to extract information. But what should we collect as a game developer? Generally, the answer to that is well, collecting data is going to cost you money to store it somewhere. On an S3 server, there's a whole bunch of places you can store data, but most of them, it's going to cost you if you start storing a massive amount of data. So you generally only want to collect data that's actually relevant to your game, right? You don't want to necessarily be collecting data that is kind of irrelevant and you don't actually need and you're never going to use, because it kind of costs you money. The second aspect of that is what should you collect from an ethical point of view. Yeah, GDPR and the what do you tell your users about what you're collecting, these are the elephant in the room on all of the big data research. Most of it in the US hasn't worried so much about the sort of GDPR and privacy. Once the user kind of gives you their data, it's yours, you can do anything you like with it. In Europe, we're not the same. So what we need to tell the users have changed. We need to tell them a lot more about what we're collecting, and we also need to allow them ways of deleting it. Now that creates some real problems with big data, because if I've just recorded actions with no user link to them, you can't delete those because I don't know which user that data came from, right? So it's already in the system and I don't know. However, it might be possible for someone to go through my data, which I don't know which user it's associated with, but they might be able to compare my data with access logs or with player statistics or with some other collection system and go, aha, that was the player who started then and finished then. So all of the data for that session is associated with that user. And so then I would be under a requirement to be able to delete that user. So there's now that we are much more concerned about privacy, all of these questions around big data become much more complex. So although we can collect a lot, it is quite possible to do. And the standard thing is just, the simplest one is URL. You do your C curl, so you do your C URL. You just push data in posts to a server, and that's the very simplest. All game engines have an access to internet, so you can just push stuff that way. You could then go lower level on the sockets and be actually connecting using UDP to a socket and send your own data. You could encrypt the data and send it that way and then decrypt it at the other end. There are lots of those sort of things. Now, when you're collecting that data, one of the reasons we collect it in games is it kind of used to be that games were produced and sold as a product, right? So go on store, go in a box, you buy the box, come at home, you'd install it, and then you'd be able to play the game. Now, of course, you install it, and then you have to go online and get all the patches because what you bought in the box is no longer functional. But very few of you actually go to a store and buy a physical box with a game in it. You mostly buy on Steam, and so you just download the latest version. And then Steam has to update lots and lots of times. But because of that updating process, games have become more of a service. It's not that you get what was there on release date. You kind of get things that are being updated. Now, to know what to update, to know what to put effort into, we often use, modern games will use the player data of which levels are being played, where people are being blocked, what content is most used and most valuable, and so that's where you put your effort to do the updating. If there's a section of your game that nobody, kind of like one or two people access, so it's accessible, but nobody seems to spend any time, there's not much point kind of making it much better, because no one gets to that point in the game anyway. So you should focus on where people are leaving, make that bit better. To know that, you need data around the players, when they start, when they finish, why they finish, and be collecting that information to improve the game so that you can keep people for longer or find where they've got bugs. Now, to do that, you do need to be having some kind of big data collection service. It also, if you're going to do downloadable content, you kind of want data to figure out what's going on with the downloadable content. And if you are developing a version 2 of your game, knowing what worked well in your previous version by having all the data around what people were playing and how often they played and when they stopped and how fast they progressed is very useful. It also allows you to build better analytics and develop your next game with a tighter focus on the user. Now, this moves us into sort of player analytics. So when we're going to be collecting data, we can collect data from single users. And that means we manually collect things like the player time. So like when you start and when you finish playing, the duration, are you playing in the evening or in the morning? And we can manually record actions, right? So you do things and we post those actions. We also get some interesting stuff from the platform stats. So if any of you, I don't know if any of you have an Android developer console login, and have any of you got an Android, paid up Android developers? Don't know. There's no one saying, yes, it's me, no. So it was like $25 US, so it's not a huge amount. We have a Android developer login, and in fact I can take you there and show you some of our previous students' work which we uploaded onto the Android platform. But it breaks it down into the country where your installs are, the language they're using, the version of Android they're using, the number of total installs, the number of active installs, and all of that statistics come through on the platform stats, right? So even without you manually collecting things, you can actually get a lot of information just from either Android or iOS or from Steam. You get information about your game and how it's being used. So with you doing no data collection at all, you still get a bunch of data about users. What you want to do, however, is if you're going to try and use data to improve the quality of your game, you want to start doing things like what we see here is spatial data from Halo, right? So Halo actually published a lot of its spatial data. And yeah, so the idea is that in Halo, when you got killed, it would register that and it would take that XY position on the map and increase kind of the intensity of the color at that point and with a wee circle around it. And so you can build what's called a heat map, which increases the kind of heat, so the number of events at locations on maps. Now this was quite useful for tracking and debugging, because if you saw everybody dying at a certain point, you go, what's happening there? It also allows people to see where, and they would record in Halo, you were recording both where people died and also when someone died, somebody shot them. And so you also record where they were shot from. So now you have two maps. You have a death map and a kill map. The kill map is where is the person who is killing you, and the death map is where are you dying. Now the kill maps are really useful to work out where sniper positions were, right? Because if someone was sitting in a sniper position, then you'd get a lot of kills mount up on a single wee point, as they were getting lots of kills at that point, and the death map would show you where people were dying, right? So those were kind of two different spatial data sets, and you can analyze those and use those to improve your game. We created a very simple one, WebTix version, which we currently still have running, where you just log events, you send events to that database, and spatial events can easily be mapped with a heat map JS, right? So it just takes the data from a database and just maps it, creates a heat map in real time. Also, d3.js is really good for taking data from a database like positional data with a heat map and displaying it in interesting ways, right? So games often will have some spatial data like that. There's also non-spatial data that you can extract from your game, and this is where you start recording things that are happening in your game and start visualizing them according to kind of so for example, that was another one where they were looking at the win percentages of different character classes at different levels, and so the idea was like trying to work out which character class is better. You kind of get a non-spatial data. You're just looking at win statistics. Now, one of my favorite robot games, if you want to play with game stats, is Robocode. Right, so if you go to Robocode, and I haven't put the link in the lecture slides, but I'll talk about it in the Discord. So Robocode is a simple wee tank combat game where the idea is that you program AI, but then you can decide how many rounds of games there are, and it will play against itself. So you program up your AI, and then you play it against itself and see how you go, right? And by doing that, it would build up stats to see what was the best AI. Right? Now, you see a kind of mirror of that, a kind of continuation, of evolution of that in the coding game. Right? If you go to coding game and you look at, if you can't spell coding game only has one G. So it's like coding game. So it's like code in game, but code in game. Or COD in game, depending on how you say the separation. But coding aim has, when you program an AI, you then play it against other people's AIs, and you get player statistics, and eventually from that you're able to build up data about which is the best AI. Right? So those are kind of automatic playing systems. So that's the link. Excellent, well done. So if you look up coding game, you can also see player data coming, like the AI is generating lots of data, and it plays those to get information about the game and which is the best AI. Now, the system that Halo used was bespoke. They had a lot of good developers, so they created their own data analytics tool. Myself and Jason many years ago wrote a book chapter and talked about how you do this relatively simply with an object database and just straight C++ web-based post data and post kind of start and end, and how you can use this for debugging purposes. So you send the data. Now we've evolved from there. And so instead of just having kind of a few million, we now have Facebook, which does something called A/B testing. Now, I assume, have all of you heard of A/B testing before? I don't know if it's my gamers, I've talked about it before, but I'm not sure if it's the standard that all of you know. Yeah, okay, so not really. Okay, so at least one of you haven't heard of A/B testing. So the idea of A/B testing is that what you do is when you've got enough users, right? So if you're trying to do this heuristically and you're just trying to say, well, what's a better design? Then you might want to interview people, or you watch people, or you kind of try and show them one and say, well, okay, what's this like? When you're Facebook or you've got big data, instead of using human intuition, what you do is you just carve off a group of your users and you present them with one type of interface, and you present another group with another type of interface, and then you just compare the amount of data, like the quality of the interactions you get back, right? So if one gets you more money, if A gets you more money than B, and all you care about is money, is then you move over to using A as the standard. You'll see this a lot in newspapers, do this all the time. And so what they're doing now is they'll give you a heading, like the clickbait title for a news article. They'll A/B test them, so they'll send half of their users one title for a news article, and then send another group of users a different title for the article, and they'll see which one in the heading page do more people click on. And the more people that click on it, that says, that's a better title for this article, and so new people coming to our webpage will get the one that people clicked on more, right? So it's kind of automating the clickbaitiness of your news. Now Facebook, we had a Facebook developer here visiting last week, and he said that Facebook they don't actually use personas or do any of that crazy design stuff anymore. They just use data-driven design and A/B testing on everything. And currently they had over 900 different A/B tests that were running, which means there are 1,800 varieties of Facebook that you could be using, because you could be on either side of that A/B test, which is just ridiculous, right? That they make that many varieties. But, with billions of users, a billion users? Don't know if they're a billion yet. They're close. But with hundreds of millions of users, you can carve off, 20,000 of them and see what effect moving the button to here will have. Right? So you don't have to think about it. You just try some stuff, send it out there, see what works. If it works, great. That's the way we do it now. You do need massive numbers of users. So for what most of you will be doing, you're not got large numbers of users. But when you are Epic and you've just released Fortnite and you've now got hundreds of millions of players, or your Facebook, or your Google, or your EA, and you're aggregating data from many, many games, then you start to be able to do these kind of big data analysis of your users. Now, for you guys, there's a couple of useful tools that I would suggest that if you're interested in data, in collecting data, then the game analytics stuff is probably the biggest, because it's free. There is a premium service, but it's kind of free to use. So it's free to use. If it's free, we always worry about how are they making their money, but they do seem to be pretty good, and it is an analytics service. You pay for a deeper analytics, so there does seem to be a business model rather than just selling your game analytics to the highest bidder. They do have a business model around paying for more information, but there is also a completely open source version called Red Metrics, and RedMetrics.io, it's a GitHub repo, you can fork them, but they also allow you to use their system completely free, but it's completely open, which means any data you send to Red Metrics also appears on their website. And you can go through and look at all the games that are currently storing data on Red Metrics and find, and they say very explicitly, do not send player names or email addresses or IP addresses to us because everyone will see them. So use a player token that only the developer knows, and then send data associated with that. It means that you guys could go in and do some analytics in Red Metrics. You'd actually, because anyone who wanted to research this area, one of the challenges is do I need to make a full game and then analyze the data I get from that game? That's a lot of work before I even start having data. If you go to Red Metrics, you could look at one of the games there that's being currently used and played, and because it's fully open, you can do some data analysis on it. You can start visualizing things. You can start playing with the data they have, because it's fully open. Whereas with game analytics, you won't get other people's data. There are services, aggregating services, which you can pay for. There's an Israeli academic who's actually letting us use some of that here in Vic. But what they do is they actually have the publishers are able to aggregate data across many games. So you as a developer, you only get your own data, but if you're paying for access to this service, or you're one of their developers, then you can actually extract data from hundreds of games and have a look at all the information going back and forth and do things like saying, right, so there's this many people who seem to be playing in an exploratory phase, right? And so those kind of tools for analyzing data from other people's games are now out there and people are paying for them, right? So this is a big market at the moment, and one of the things that Mariusz was talking about at that Mobile Summit, I think, or Web Summit a couple of years ago, in the modern economy, attention is one of the most valuable resources. And the thing with big data is you can find out what people are paying attention to. So you can see where they're spending their money, and you can see what trends there are in that and when you might have an opportunity to influence them. So now, in terms of the bit I didn't quite fill out as much, I've got those tools in there. How do you analyze it? That's mostly AI, right? Once you move into how do I analyze big data, how do I extract information, how do I find sequences, how do I identify trends in the data, there's like massive courses on artificial intelligence ways of identifying trends and signal processing, right? Because once you've got big data, you kind of have a signal, right? But you don't know what's in the signal. So you have to process that signal to try and extract relevant information. And so signal processing lectures and artificial intelligence approaches to processing that big data. Now, visualizing it, so when I talk about using game systems, visualizing your spatial data, that's one way of processing it, basically. You take a stream of X, Y's and a value and you try and visualize it in a heat map. You can try and visualize other things. We have a PhD looking at visualization in VR, but data visualization is its own massive topic, independent of games. It's a fairly standard challenge of how do I extract information from this massive stream of data. Gamers, what we're mostly interested in is things like, where did this game fall down? Where did it break? Where were the bugs? When did people stop playing my game? What enticed people to play my game, right? So those are the kind of things that we look at. Ethics and the future. In terms of the future, I think the big thing is that there will just be more and more data collected about you, and we're moving into a stage where kind of every aspect of our lives will be recorded, and so that becomes a bit of a challenge. The ethics around it is where we're really at as a discussion in game technology, because the technology that you need to add to your game to record player behavior is now very easy, right? Game analytics, you just drop in a Unity plugin, bang, it records everything you could ever want to know. So the tech bit of the recording is easy. The data analysis is an AI challenge, and that's becoming easier with deep learning once you know what you're looking for. But the big challenge for big data is the legal and ethical restrictions. And of course, GDPR, the one that came in this year, is the big update to privacy regulations. And so for big data and for data analysis, potentially the biggest challenge is that you're not allowed to go fishing for data, right? You're not just allowed to collect everything and then post hoc go through and go, I wonder what's interesting about our users. So we'll just record all the audio in the room, all the video in the room. We'll record, what other games they've got installed on their computer, and we'll just record everything and then go fishing for interesting correlations. Yeah, GDPR basically, no, you just no, you're not allowed to do that, right? That's illegal. That's breaching someone's privacy. You have to tell users what you're going to collect about them, how long you're going to store that information, and what you're going to do with it, right? So you have to explicitly tell them, and there's the legal requirement that they actually understand what you're asking. So you can't do it in legalese and in a confusing way. Now, So that means, basically, as game developers, most game developers are probably breaching GDPR regulations, right? Because most of them do not actually have proper privacy rules around how they're collecting data, how long they're going to store it, and what they're using it for, right? However, it's not a big deal because they're usually not using it badly, and so it's unlikely to form large lawsuits. However, as you saw with Cambridge Analytica, just like collecting data and then later selling it on and people using it for nefarious purposes can get you into a lot of trouble. So before you even start thinking about how you can collect big data out of your games, and even before you start collecting data from real people, you need to think about the ethics of what you're collecting, how much you're collecting, how you're storing it, and how long you're storing it. Now, most of you, if you're just storing anonymous player data, so you're not tying it to an email address, you're not tying it to a login, you're just testing when the game started, when it ended, like that it had an end event and a start event, so it didn't crash. How long it took to get to level 1, completely anonymously. I have no idea who is playing this game, or what device they're playing it on, or which IP they're coming from. If you're doing that, you're probably okay. You're not collecting private data. But the moment you attach any of that to a user token that's identifiable, or a device ID that's identifiable, or an IP that's identifiable, then you are in privacy regulation issues. Anytime your data could be combined reasonably to extract who was doing it, again, you're now in privacy data issues. So although it used to be kind of the Wild West and you could do almost anything you like, then yes, you'd be just collecting random whatever. I'm fine to collect anything. Now we actually have much stronger regulations. Now I see there is a question there of so one group of users will suddenly get a change of the user interface for Facebook A/B testing. The answer is yes, that's exactly what happens. So hundreds or millions of users will get a new update to Facebook. That will be some variation from all of the other people on Facebook. Usually they do these in patches and in groups of friends, so they'll change kind of a network of people so that they kind of, so you don't go, oh, look at mine, it's different to yours. So there's like they run these in different ways, but they are running these tests constantly. The one of the and kind of that idea of collecting massive amounts of data with the GDPR. One of the other things that you want to do is also have the ability to delete yourself from the data. Now, and this is the right to be forgotten kind of thing. Now, with games recording data about you, if I'm in a multiplayer game, right, and I've got multiplayer chat, and you ask me to delete all of my chat history, right, because, you know, certainly as a game developer, I may well have stored the chat history so you could have a look at the chat during that game, right, if you're doing replay, or maybe we're using the chat in the game to work out what people were talking about to see if there were particular elements in the game that they liked or disliked, and we can run what's called sentiment analysis. So this is a relatively easy thing to do, where what they do is they look at positive words and they look at the nouns around those words to say, okay, if I say, you know, oh, what a lovely cat, right? Lovely is a positive word. There's the word cat in the sentence. So I'm probably being nice about cats, right? So on chat, all of what you're talking about is probably having sentiment analysis done to it. Twitter has sentiment analysis. People run sentiment analysis on tweets, on game chat. And so what you do is you can see the game chat, you can see what people are chatting about. And so if they start like talking shit about some parts of your game, you can go, oh, okay, the users really dislike this thing because they keep using really like negative words with the shotgun, right? So just from user chat, they don't have to tell me on the forums, they don't have to kind of send like error messages or get yelly at me. I'm just kind of sentiment analysis and run that data over my chat logs of all the games, of all the people chatting in my game, and just see and just get a kind of sentiment analysis and say, oh, okay, so these words are generally associated with positive experiences, and these words are associated with negative experiences. Okay, maybe we should change our game. When someone comes to you and say, right, I want to be removed, and they're half of a chat conversation, if I remove them, and let's say it's a chat between me and PMS. If it was a chat between me and PMS, I could say, hi PMS, how's it going? And then PMS would respond. And then I'd say, oh, yeah, no, I hate how the assignment has so much writing to do. Yeah, no, I was also struggling with the conclusion part. So even from my half of the conversation, you might find out a lot of information about what is happening with PMS. Right? So even though he's been asked to be removed, the fact that I refer to him by name and I respond to his challenges and kind of say them back means that it's almost impossible for him to extract himself from the data because he's part of the chain. And so this is a really big challenge, and we see this in big data as well. Facebook's very good at identifying people who are not users of Facebook by all of their friends knowing who they are, and them appearing in their friends' photographs and in their friends' discussions and in their friends talking about them. And so they've got profiles of users who are not Facebook users based on the fact that because of the shape of the hole in the data, there must be a person there and they're generating all of this content. So that kind of data analysis, that is what gets up people's nose, right? Particularly the privacy people, where they say, hey, you're not supposed to be collecting data about me. I'm not even one of your users. And yet you have a profile of me and a profile of my information. That's unacceptable. Now, where that becomes a big problem is as you collect a large amount of information, you can collect information about people who aren't subscribed. And so they didn't even know to ask you to remove it because they don't know that you have it. So we've got a lot of asymmetry there. Another aspect of big data collection is when we get into collecting like unknown side channel data. So this is a challenge around if you've got photographs or you're collecting information. Most of you, if you're just doing a standard, I was just collecting the player data, I was just collecting some like hit data when you click the mouse. And the answer is yeah, but that probably came with an IP address, right? Now, the intermediates along the path were probably storing that IP address because for their routing tables and for packet information, and so there's potentially logs of everything. Now, that IP address might not be identifiable by you, but it may be identified by other people. And so if you're just recording all information that comes into you from a URL hit, then you get a lot of data about a user. If you've been uploading photographs, if someone uploads a photograph to your game, so you say they want to take a photo and have their avatar photo, you might think, oh yeah, that's pretty personal. But if their GPS data is turned on by default on their photograph tool, then suddenly you've also got not just their picture, but you've also got their GPS location. And you might have what kind of camera was used, and therefore you can work out what phone they're on. And so you've actually collected a whole bunch of incidental data. Right? And that means that incidental data, so even if you say, hey, take a photograph of your cat, and they take a photograph of their cat and upload that. If it's their cat, it's probably in their house. GPS says where they are, which means you probably know where they live. And so you can trace that back to who they are. So even though they've only uploaded a photograph of their cat, you now know something about them. That's also regulated. It's also the responsibility of the game developer to know what incidental data they might be collecting. Right? Under GDPR, and you're supposed to limit that, right? So this becomes quite a kind of stressful lecture. It's not just a, hey, data, great analysis, change game. It is, when you are recording this data, you have to know all of these things. Tell the user how you're going to process that data before you even start processing your big data, right? Now that means that it may be that a whole bunch of big data analysis in the EU now becomes illegal because the people providing the data weren't told how their data was going to be used, right? Now, the question is, does that offshore? Does it go somewhere else? Who does that analysis? How did it? And like, if we're not doing it, is someone else doing it to us without us knowing? As a game developer, you need to be very clear with your end user license agreement what data you're collecting and why you're collecting it and how long you'll store it. Now, if it's any personal data, this hasn't really, we're starting to see it coming through in some of the end user license agreement. You're starting to see more data policies coming through, but that's the big change in big data in games. And for doing research, we've already had research ethics. Basically, this is trying to force companies to handle people's data ethically, right? And so that's what we're trying to move towards. So although it feels quite onerous for some of what we get you guys to do, to actually write, notify NSD about the data you're collecting and how you're going to use it and those information, that is now becoming a requirement for all companies, right? And so those notification processes are now legally required. The challenge is that we don't have the infrastructure around all the data and clean handling of data and intermediate services that handle data cleanly. That's not there. And so although we might be clean with our data, this incidental collection, the unknown collection of data, is something that we will be dealing with for the next few years, as kind of you get the dual push of, I've got all this data that I could use to find out information, but I kind of know I'm not supposed to use it, but no one will know. So yeah, that's going to happen a lot. We in academia, we have to kind of lead the way in this and actually try and handle data correctly, and try and encourage you as our students and graduates to handle data correctly. What that means is you need to clean your data. So when you see it come in, check all of the data you're getting and delete the stuff that you didn't intend to collect. Right? So that's part of the requirement. Be conscious of collecting data that is relevant for what you're trying to achieve. Don't just go fishing for as much private data about the user as possible. And this is going to be a bit of a challenge, because certainly American companies will be collecting as much data, and a bunch of them don't care that they're breaking European law, even though they could be fined in Europe for what they're doing. So you'll see games will do this, but you in the EU doing that big data collection, you're not supposed to. Other than that, collecting player data that's completely disconnected from any token, so that you can't identify who it is, so that you can improve the game and make the game better. That's perfectly reasonable to collect. And it's not a bad thing to tell players that, to improve the game, we are logging this data. You'll see some games now will say, like, do you want to contribute to improve our product? And you can say yes or no. Part of the GDPR is that you're not supposed to limit people's access who say no to having their privacy removed, right? So you're supposed to still give people access to your product even if they say they don't want their information recorded, right? So that's one of the changes. You're not just allowed to go, oh, so you don't like our privacy rule? Well, you can't use our software. So they're also trying to regulate around that, which, yeah, is very hard, and they're probably not going to succeed. So we'll see how that goes. Now, one of the things that I'm interested in from you guys is, in terms of the data collection you are thinking of doing for your games, the tools that I suggest, so Red Metric is quite a good way of doing it if you're being completely open. what would be your normal way of recording data from your apps and your games, and what data have you guys been recording? So that's my question. So you can either talk to me or use Discord. I've got a few people up there. I look up because my Discord's on the screen above the laptop. So what are we using for, have you been recording data from your games? Right, yeah, you probably haven't recorded, and in fact, yeah, most people haven't recorded much data. It's one of the things we probably haven't done enough, spent enough time with in the undergraduate, is encouraging people to start logging game data as quickly as possible to detect bugs and errors and when a game drops out, right? So to treat logging as part of bug tracking. I'm fairly certain that I haven't trained any of my undergraduates to choose to turn on the webcam and start capturing video feed and uploading that to a server. I've not noticed any of them do that in the games that I've tested with my students. But you know, it's not that hard to do. It's actually relatively easy to do that sort of stuff. It's not cool, but it's quite easy to do. Have any of you looked at so I don't know if any of you are information security, but have any of you looked at what information you can get from the operating system? I've mentioned it, I've just haven't, none of you actually done it. I assume that none of you have done it, otherwise maybe you have seen me marking your assignment at some point because you've logged the fact that I've started using it, and so you've logged my video, so you see, you know, me at home marking your assignment or me at work marking your assignment. I don't think I've had any student do that, and I don't think I've had any students do a screen capture of my screen while I've been marking so that they can try and extract the marking sheet. So I've got a marking sheet up, and you put you do a screen capture in your game of the marking sheet to try and find out what other people's marks are and stuff. I don't think any of you have done that to me. So yes, I'm glad it's not prioritized to do that kind of shite. But yet no. So this is always a challenge. So it's one of the things we worry about when certainly if we automatically run something that students create. There's always the worry that they might decide to try and extract data from the system that we haven't given them access to, and run at privileges that we haven't wanted them to run at. So all of that can be a bit of a challenge. Now, certainly for you guys, if you did submit an executable that was, you know, turning on my webcam to take photographs of me while I mark your assignment, I think we'd probably consider that as a fairly major breach of privacy, and we might fail you in that course. We might even get grumpy about you and say that's pretty bad form to randomly turn on the lecturer's webcam. So I would advise you not to do this. I also think that sending back screenshots from my computer while I'm testing your program, it's probably also not a cool thing to do. Mainly because I might have the spreadsheet up where I've got the marking information, and that's not a great way of getting good marks. So no, I would be concerned for you guys to not do that. But certainly in a fully information security conscious world, what I technically should be doing is I should be running your software on one computer that was completely isolated from anything else I was doing, and mark on a completely separate computer, so that there was no way of you jumping the gap and trying to access anything. So I should have a clean virtual machine and build and run within that clean virtual machine. That's how you should test your software, because otherwise I am allowing you access to a whole bunch of stuff that you shouldn't potentially have access to. We've mostly operated on an honesty basis for this. We've not. I've not seen any students do something terrible to me, and we do occasionally check the Wireshark and Wiretap stuff to see what data is being sent around, but it's a worry, right? Because when and on your mobile phone, that's why all this are you going to agree to give access to this app, to this information? Now, web pages are running in a sandbox so that they can't just crawl around your computer. But you know, executables are executables. They run a whole bunch of stuff, right? And they can save files and they can access files and they do a lot of that sort of things, and they can often run system instructions as well. So there is a lot of data that could be being collected about us, that probably is being collected by certain applications that we run, and so this is something we do need to worry about. What I like about Red Metrics is because it's all completely transparent. I get to see exactly what's been recorded about my play sessions. And that's kind of a useful way of doing of doing the sort of transparency access to information. But proprietary systems, we don't know necessarily what they're recording. So as game developers, I would encourage you to start recording stuff. I would encourage you to use something like Red Metrics and do some analysis, use D3 to visualize it, and just get some simple data, certainly from all of the stuff you guys are doing for your master's thesis. What you record and how you record it is critical for you to do an evaluation of your thesis. But that also means you need to tell the user what you're collecting and how you're going to use it, right? So informed consent is critical. But start recording data in any project you do. There should be some data logging for your own metrics and for your own kind of analysis. For your thesis, you have to do this, but once you start attaching it to people, you need to then also get ethical approval and do it properly. Okay, so do you guys have questions about data? Can't see anyone actually typing. That seems good. Okay, so I see that most of you have been putting in comments. I saw I've got a couple more comments last night about topics for you to start studying. What I'm looking forward in the semester, I want my last I could do my last formal topic as next week will be in VR and talking VR. I will send you an email through, it'll probably be tomorrow now, so I can actually set up and get an install that's going to work for us, and we will have a lecture in the VR classroom, and I will talk about VR in VR, and we'll start talking about how we improve that VR classroom, and from then I would like to start moving into some of you talking about the topic area that you've started to research, or showing off any of the implementation that you have started, right? Because I expect you to start implementing stuff or researching things, and I'd like to move to a discussion of those interesting topics that you are now able to present and to discuss with the other people, and asking questions of those topic areas. When I want you to discuss them, I would like to have a discussion around the ethics of the technology, potentially with the wider group here. So I want to see that kind of present what you're learning, what's been interesting in the particular technology that you've decided to focus on, and start moving into this to a kind of more discussion and advanced technology kind of feedback session, so that you guys can talk to each other, and also get some feedback from me on what you're doing, right? Because me just talking about technology is not the same as you learning about it and trying to implement various different things. Okay, so from next week, what we'll do is I will be in VR next week. So I will be over there in my office, and I will start up the VR. I will also use Discord again to start the chat, but my physical presence will be in the virtual space. People who don't have a VR headset can come in via a spectator mode on a PC. So that will be what we will try and do. And my goal is to try and also work out how to stream that from my secondary screen. So I've got two machines here that can both run it. So I will try and stream from one of those a live stream so people can watch the session even if they don't have a computer that can be a formal spectator, right? So I'll have some of you as formal spectators, which you can see. I'll have one as a default spectator, and we'll have that discussion. Okay, so that's what will be happening next week. So if any of you have a VR set up at home, if you can kind of get that ready for next week. Those who are in the lab, I'll be sending through the initial test executable tomorrow, so you can load it up and we can make sure that we're running on the same version and that see what things are working and what aren't working, and so I can get a new build done, so that we can run some of that test next week as a VR gaming technology. The in-place editing looks really is advancing along with Unreal. I'm really liking some of the stuff that Unreal is doing with audio, so I'm keen on doing some more stuff in Unreal. I would like some of you to do in the future of this course, if some of you are doing stuff in VR or that can be demonstrated in VR, I'd very much like to try to test in Unreal or Unity an actual implementation of some of the technology we're doing in the virtual space, so we can try and do a show and tell. That would be, I'd be very interested in trying that to see if it works, right? Because that's one of the education things I'd like to start moving towards, is seeing where a virtual classroom works better than this me talking to a small black dot and having a bunch of students kind of visually there but potentially eating breakfast or sitting in the lab being bored or something, right? So I mean, I'm trying to be interesting here, but it'd be really interesting to see where your attention is in this space. Okay, so that's what we'll try and do next week. I will be around from now until your 10 o'clock meeting, so I've got another half hour. So what I'll do is I'll stop the stream, because we'll say, yay, to big data. And I will then be around to have individual chats with people who want clarification on their topics. And I'll be around working tonight as well, so after you've had your meeting, big data, I knew you were eating breakfast. So yes, I'll be around again through to probably about 1-2 p.m, so around midnight out my time. Though I do, if I want to catch the last bus, I have to be out of here by midday. So we'll see. But no, I'll be around from now until 10. You guys can chat to me now. And then I'll try and be around after 12, after your next session. And if you have questions about the topics you're doing, you can chat to me there. I'll go and answer any questions that you have in the GitLab. Okay. Okay, so if there are no questions... oh, yes, we have a question.
Yeah, I was wondering about the clarification on, or are you talking about clarification or about the questions?
Oh, it can be, you can have a clarification. Yeah.
You cut out, so I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, okay. So yeah, no, I was just saying if there are no further the questions, I'll close down the YouTube stream, but I'll stay on Discord so people can chat, and if there's any issues they have with their topics, we can chat about that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll say goodbye to the stream, and I'll say hello to Discord. So goodbye stream, and I'll see you on YouTube next week. But I'll see the rest of you on Discord. Okay.